Story time with Stephanie Story.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Storey, and I'm an art historical novelist, and this is my show, Story Time. And I'm very excited to have my guest here today because she's a very empathetic, brilliant woman, and she's a licensed physical therapist. She runs her own foundation, and she's the author of 3 different books. One is her memoir called Unbridled. Her second book was Wounded Warrior, Wounded Wife. And her current book, which is just coming out, is Faces of Femininity, Heroic Women Throughout History. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the show, Barbara McNally.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk with you about all the books.
Okay, but first I do want to start with this one since this is the new one, right? So it's stories of women throughout history, but it's broken down into 4 categories. It's mother, lover, warrior, sage. Why did you pick those 4 different categories for women? Tell me a little bit about that breakdown.
Well, it actually came from my grandmother, who used to, very Irish, use the mother, lover. She used to say fighter, saint were the parts of a women. But in researching and talking to women, I was trying to relate these words to give a new way to think about our femininity. So most women can relate to the mother inside because we're all nurturers, whether we have children or not. And that's a very easy thing for women to identify with. Then the lover was sometimes hard for women as we age to identify with, because some of that passion and playfulness sometimes gets put on the back burner, and women will say to me, I don't even remember what my passions are, or I lost track of being playful. And of course, it's our sensual, sexual side too. And we don't want any of that to die. That's what keeps us young. So that's an important part in the book, is the lover section. And then I chose warrior instead of fighter because I got pushed back for using the word fighter because it sounded angry, I guess. Some women didn't like the word fighter, and it came from the fighting Irish, being strong. But so I switched it to warrior, which is a little softer, but still this is a hard one for women to identify with too, because we don't want to come across like we're angry or a bitch, and most of us don't fight in a war literally, even though some of us are in the military. But the warrior is really our ability to set a goal and reach it, our ability to boundary set, our ability to be strong. And all women have that within us, and it is part of our archetypes I use, but it's part of our DNA, so it is a feminine quality. And I use examples in there from Cleopatra, a woman warrior through history, to our warrior today is Tammy Duckworth, who's a congresswoman who had her legs blown off through a helicopter crash, in Iraq. And her famous words are, I'm not going to give my legs back. And that's okay, because it gives me a platform to talk about the things that matter to me. So she's a warrior. She's a congresswoman now, not only in the military, but fighting for rights that she believes in. So the last one, the sage, that was the hardest word to pick because I wanted to describe our inner wisdom, the wise woman within, which is our intuition, our spiritual side. For those who are spiritual, it's our intellect. It's our using our head, and using our intuition. And lots of times we think of this as chronological, like a lover when we're young, wise when we're old. And hopefully we are wise as we gain years. But I particularly chose young women to show that we could tap into our wisdom at any age. So I chose like Malala, Pakistan, and Anne Frank are 2 examples of wise women who were young. And I just wanted women to have another way to look at themselves, and how in modern day, most of us are working, and I've heard people say I don't have role models. And I'm saying, well, we do have role models. Let's find those women role models, those mentors, those women we respect. And when we see them in somebody else, that quality, we can see that we have that quality too within us.
Part of it that I have to ask about is this fighter, the fear of the word fighter, and then moving to the word warrior, because I think that is something that women struggle with. And there's always this this fight. But I was having a conversation with a different author the other day who was saying, well, you have to juggle between being warm and you have to be likable in order and be a leader, and it's hard to juggle those two things between women. So what have you found about how women either walk this line or don't walk this line, and they just embrace their fighter or warrior? I don't know. What can you tell all of us to help us deal with that issue that we all face?
Well, I get some pushback from older women that say, I don't have any passions, or I don't feel the warrior within me. And if they are just feel like they're a mother, a one-dimensional figure, then that's okay. I'm not trying to push an agenda. But there are some women that want to live a more complex, multidimensional life, like myself. So I'm studying what I want to learn. And being a physical therapist, I had that inner warrior in me because I had to work hard to get through school. I had to find that warrior within me when I went through a divorce, and I felt like I was a little off balance. I felt like my warrior was weak. I hadn't lived on my own, been on my own for 20 years. So I really had to dig deep for that. Being single, I had to dig deep for the warrior within me, to set boundaries, dating, to just to be an independent woman. It's an important quality. And of course, if I'm just a warrior, then I may be one-dimensional too. So it's a fun balancing act. Like you're talking about being successful career-wise. I think, like, yes, we want to be a warrior, but we also want to be a lover. We want to seduce the people we're interviewing. We want to, you're very seductive. You're very warm and nurturing. So we want to bring that all in, and it makes us a more well-rounded person. It makes us better in whatever type of work we use or choose to go into, if we could tap into all these qualities. But if you want to talk about how you balance the mother, lover, warrior stage, because lots of times people think writing a book is just pure passion, but the hard work and the grit is the warrior. I say write drunk and edit sober, but it's fun to have an idea. Everybody has an idea to write a book, but not very many people follow through. So if you want to talk more like on how you relate to, the passion of why you wrote your book, and the warrior in you, that how you stuck through it, and I guess your sage, how you knew this would be a bestseller. Like the last book, you knew it would be, but you must have known somewhere inside,
I thought my mother and like a few of her friends would read Oil of Marble. I did not think, no, of course not. I've worked in Hollywood for too long. So I had no sageness about it. That was complete, wow. Okay, people read it. That's crazy.
But you are a sage to come up with that idea because it was a hook that people liked. So you trusted your intuition. But I like to hear how you related these 4 faces in writing the book, and maybe who inspired you throughout your life. Because I think as we share our stories, it helps other women kind of like relate to, so that who could maybe inspire them in their life. It doesn't, obviously there's only 43 women in here. I'm just giving a touch, like for people to kind of think about these things. It's just a new way of thinking, and they can research other women. These aren't set. It's just the idea of like who's a mother figure, or who's a lover figure, or warrior figure, or sage figure that inspires you. And then we can think for us, who else?
Thinking of other people, for me, Jane Austen would like fall into maybe the sage category for me. She was brilliant. When I read, it was the first time I had ever been exposed to a female writer who had such wit and intelligence about the world we live in.
Right.
And I loved her for her brain. So that's one of those for me. How I balance it, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how I balance the warrior part, Like, I love hearing from you that that the warrior part is in part grit and fight and determination, because I have a lot of that. Because to write a novel, you gotta, it is a lot of work, and it never ends, and you got to keep pushing yourself. So I'm glad to hear that falls into the warrior category. It actually makes me feel better about the category instead of just frightened by it. One of the other things that you talked about at the beginning was this idea of this lover. And in your introduction, you talk about your daughter coming in and saying, I know what I want to be when I grow up. Mommy, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that you had lost touch with sort of yourself, which is what I sort of associate with that lover quality. Can you tell my readers who have not read it yet, but maybe want to pick this up, a little bit about that story and a little bit about what made you sort of go into your own transformative story?
Right. I think we all like to study what we want to learn more of, right? And I was on this journey because I felt like I had been one-dimensional in my marriage, a mom, which I loved, but I felt like I had lost touch with the passionate side, the playful side. And I had lost touch with any power within the marriage, the warrior, and I hadn't really listened to my intuition. So I was on my journey to tap into those was part of my reason for writing the book. I've been working on the book for 10 years. So, and it is the name of my foundation. So tapping into these archetypes, which Carl Jung is a psychoanalyst way back. And so I didn't come up with this idea totally on my own. I studied like what are we made up with? And we have these qualities.
But a lot of women like you go on their own personal journey, which you describe in your memoir, Unbridled. But then they don't then transition into dedicating their lives to helping other women empower themselves and other people improve their life and their journey. What about you, or what about your journey led you back to give that back to other people?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's balance. I said I was the mother, and then I broke out of my marriage, had an affair, which I write about. So I'm the bad girl, take off, travel, and just kind of me, have a lot of fun. And on that journey, I actually ended up in Jamaica thinking I was just going to have fun, and ended up working at an orphanage for girls who had no choices in life. They were either prostitution or live on the streets. Selling seashells, was worth, they get paid 25 cents and they could do a few tricks and make lots of money. But these were young girls who had no birth control, no education. And that's what made me decide to start a foundation, because in America, most of us do have choices. And I had many choices that I just didn't take advantage of. So I wanted to help in my own backyard. And I moved to Coronado. I'm a physical therapist working with wounded warriors. After 9/11, I met so many young caregivers that were unique in that this group of caregivers is young. They're all under 40. They have no support system because they're here on a military base away from their family. And they're working usually at home, in the home and no support. So I started this foundation to help in my own backyard. So women listening, we can always help, and it's part of our lever. It's part of just it brings me joy too. But it's right in my backyard versus across the country or in another country.
Specifically, a lot of your foundation work, you end up working, and you're in San Diego. So which is a very military town. For people who do not associate San Diego with the military, my husband's from San Diego. It is a military town. And you're a physical therapist, and you end up working a lot with wounded warriors' wives, right? Like the spouses of warriors who have been injured in battle.
Correct.
What specifically do you learn from them that can help women who are not wounded warriors, who are not the wives of soldiers? Like don't you learn things that are broad and universal from this very specific subset of women?
Right, and that's what motivated me to write my second book, Wounded Warrior, Wounded Wife, because I'd already written my own story, and I wanted to give a platform to other women to write their story. And one thing I learned is when there's a wounded warrior, there's a wounded wife too. And what I mean by that is when this man who's only 18 to 20's life is ruined, his wife's life has changed dramatically too, and that the stories are of women overcoming challenges, and we all love stories of heroes, right? And so these are heroines that have overcome challenges, and I wanted to put it out there for everyone to read, because we love to read stories of heroes, right? And then we feel like we can overcome challenges within our own lives.
If you're trying to show women a version of events where they can overcome obstacles, why? I'm not angry at the choice. I'm just fascinated by it. Why include women like Wonder Woman in this book under the warrior category? They're not, I mean, she's not a real woman. She's a comic book hero. So what do you think we can all learn from including, you know, fictional characters, which I love? Again, not mad at it, just fascinated with it.
That's a good question. One reason I did is because when I was writing the book, Wonder Woman, like with the Me Too movement, kept popping up on Instagram everywhere. And so I found her story interesting. Wonder Woman is truer than life. And I think why I put some fictional characters in there is because I'm not saying we can become that. Like, we have the pressure that, oh, women now need to do it all and be all. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there are some fictional characters out there like Wonder Woman who has it all, does it all. But let's remember, she's a fictional character, and we can still aspire to that. But the other women, which I hope the readers will find interesting, is they're human. So I presented them in a way to show their humanness so that we can relate to them and not put them on a pedestal. For example, Coco Chanel, we love her because of the little black dress, and it seems like a lot of women, you know, idolize her, but she also might have been a Nazi sympathizer, and she was a drug addict. So it's like, we can love her for that particular, her imagination with clothing and her ability to start a business, but that doesn't mean that we put her on a pedestal for everything. Does that make sense?
Oh, I love it, because that's what I try to do with my guys, is take artists, these huge artists that we revere in the world, take them off a pedestal and say, no, they were human. They were just like you and me. We all make mistakes. We can have people who we admire and we think are heroes, but we need to understand that they also were extraordinarily flawed and no different than you or I are. And I think it gives us, you know, a way to move forward and a way to emulate people and a way to relate to people that otherwise maybe aren't so relatable.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the hardest, my biggest challenge for writing this book was having these women relatable, because we all think of like, okay, you know, she accomplished that. Well, what's that have to do with me? But I say that if you admire what she did, you have that quality within you too. For example, Anne Sullivan, I put in there because she was Helen Keller's teacher. And when I was young, I read that book and I identified with the healer, the nurturer. And I have that quality within me. And I decided to go into physical therapy because of that book.
Really?
So I relate to her, but somebody else may be more an environmentalist and relate to Rachel Carson, or my daughter loves to cook, so she relates to Julia Childs. That doesn't mean I expect that she will grow up to be the next Julia Childs. I'm just saying, because you relate to her, there's something in you that's drawing that, you know, whether it's cooking or teaching, or what about her can you find within yourself?
One thing I do have to ask about is, during this pandemic, you're in Southern California, right? So you've been sheltering in place. How has this pandemic changed the way you see these relationships and the way women can, or the way women can build on themselves, and or you can, I don't care, you can choose which of these questions to answer, and or how is it affecting your work and your creativity?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, since the model is the mother, lover, warrior, sage, I'm going to go back to that. It's given me a great chance to nurture, you know, as a physical therapist. And I have a daughter who, actually, I'm a grandmother. I hate to admit it. She's 2 years. So I've been helping with my granddaughter. And I've been visiting my mom, who's shut in from a distance. So the nurture, like, we can really like see how can we nurture during this time, and everybody's in a different situation. I happen to be in a really great one that I'm not working from home with a bunch of little kids around me, so I do have a lot of freedom. The lover, how Tina Fey is one of my favorite too, and as a lover, I only gave one comedian, but I love comedy because we've got to laugh and enjoy this time. I mean, life is short, so any way I can find joy, whether it's now I can run on the beach in San Diego, dancing I love, well, I'm dancing at home. You know, we've got to, life goes by too fast. So tap into that lever, have some fun. The Warrior, I've had to redo, I'm not very disciplined at working out and I miss the gym. So I've had to kind of make a schedule and work out at home, which I'm really proud of myself that I've been able to discipline myself to do that. And the intuition, I guess, is not listening to too much news and really, I mean, it's so political. It's like, I do trust my instinct kind of what's going on. I watch enough, but using my intuition to not make us go crazy. You know, this is temporary.
Which category, or was there a category that was harder to fill than the others? Because you brought up trying to, you know, fill the mother category. Was there a category that was harder to find names for? Or is there a category that was really easy and you had way too many names and it was about culling it down? Were any of those things true?
Well, I think the hardest part was pigeonholing them into categories. Because like Tina Fey, I put as a comedian, but you know, she could be a sage too. And she's balancing, I didn't put integrated woman. When I started the book, I had mother, lover, warrior, sage, and then the integrated woman. But then I got pushback from my editor, thank her, that, well, who's to say what's integrated? And there's so many different ways that we integrate. But Tina Fey I put her as a comedian, but she's a pretty integrated woman. She's mothering of her kids. She's such a sage. Her wit is unbelievable. She's a warrior. She's a tough woman. So, I mean, she's got it all, but I put her, I guess it was hard for me to only pick 43 women, and it was hard for me to put them in particular categories because I was more wanting to show the laughter, the fun part. And I could have used Ellen DeGeneres, Tina Fey. I mean, there's so many great women that make us laugh. So yeah, I think that was the hardest part, is picking which category they would go into.
Okay, I said that was my last question, but now I have one more. What did you learn, you personally, not on behalf of other women? What was the thing you learned for your life putting this book together? You get to name like the biggest, most important thing you learned.
Well, that's a great question. I love the quote that it's not what we get from our achievements, but what we become. And I think from writing this book, I've become so much wiser. I've learned so much. I've made great connections with people like you. So I feel like I've really grown through this process to become a more balanced person. That's what I've been studying, and that's what I want to become. And I think I'm on that journey. So I learned so much for myself, and I hopefully have become a more integrated woman through writing this story.
Okay, good. I love that. Okay. Okay, on that, I am actually going to end this conversation, but this has been a lovely conversation, and I really appreciate you coming and sharing all of your wisdom, all of your sageness about women, and good luck on this crazy journey that is publishing and life and the whole thing. And thank you for joining me, Barbara. And goodbye until next time, everybody.
Stephanie story time virtually. We've got time and plenty of stories, talking stories in a novel way. Story time with Stephanie Story.